Mike's calling.
Online it said that they were looking at voting tonight.
Pleasant Valley Community School District Board of Education meeting Thursday, January 28th, 2021, at 6 o'clock p.m. Belmont Administration Center.
Okay. Sounds good.
She gonna come to your phone?
Population? So now I don't need
I got Mike now, yes.
I like to ask some questions to this. But no surgery in this. Yes.
Mike, can you try speaking again, please? I have you. I just think it should come through the thunder for some reason. Give me 1 second. Mike, try speaking again, please.
Hi, this is Mike. Can you hear me?
I got you. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. It's just not working. We'll run my speaker here for some reason. I just have to plug it in. No, you're good. I'm connected, but it's just not going through it for some reason.
Nobody else.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call, please, Ms. Stevens.
Ms. Anderson? Ms. Anderson?
Here, present.
Mr. Ayers?
Here.
Mrs. Brockman? Here. Ms. Dixon?
Here.
Mrs. Hoskins? Here. Mrs. Kunkel? Here. Dr. Weber?
Here. Please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any questions regarding this evening's agenda? If not, I will take a motion.
I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dixon, second by Mr. Ayers. To approve the agenda as presented, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Vision statement. It is the vision of the Pleasant Valley Community School District to provide the finest academic and extracurricular programs in the state. Not in some things, but in everything. Not for some students, but for all students. Welcome to our guests. If you would like to address the board meeting regarding a non-agenda item, now would be the opportunity to do so. Anybody? Okay, and to board members, Ms. Anderson, do you have anything? Ms. Anderson?
No.
Okay. Ms. Ayers?
I have nothing, thank you.
Ms. Hoskins?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Ms. Kunkel?
Nothing for me.
Ms. Rockman?
I have nothing, thanks.
Dixon?
I have nothing, thank you.
Dr. Lewis? Okay. Mr. Zimmer?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Mr. Finginsmith?
I have nothing.
Okay. Ms. Damon?
Nothing.
Okay. And Mr. Struz?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, great. We don't really have any recognition today, so we're just gonna go to the consent agenda. Are there any questions on this evening's consent agenda? If not, I will take a motion.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ayers, second by Ms. Hoskins to approve this evening's consent agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we'll move on to approval of bills. The general fund.
I move that general fund warrants be issued in a total amount of $381,118.08 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dixon, second by Ms. Brockman, that the general fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nutrition fund.
I move that nutrition fund warrants be issued in a total amount of $27,037.05 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ayers, second by Ms. Hoskins, that the nutrition fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Elementary junior high activity fund.
I move that elementary junior high activity fund warrants be issued in the total amount of $75.78 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Hoskins, second by Ms. Dixon, that the elementary junior high activity fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? High school activity fund.
I move that the high school activity fund warrants be issued in a total amount of $3,826.36 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ayers, second by Ms. Brockman, that the high school activity fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Management fund.
I move that management fund warrants be issued in the total amount of $15,495 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dixon, second by Ms. Kunkel, that the management fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Capital projects fund.
I move that capital project fund warrants be issued in the total amount of $486,346.90 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Hoskins, second by Ms. Brockman, that the capital projects fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Capital fund.
I move that PEPAL fund warrants be issued in the total amount of $350,715.86 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Brockman, second by Ms. Dixon, that the PEPAL fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye. All opposed? And internal service fund.
I move that internal service fund warrants 6190 through 6196 be issued in the total amount of $430,859.25 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dixon, second by Mr. Ayers, that the internal service fund warrants 6190 through 6196 be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye. All opposed? And then the trust fund.
I move the trust fund warrants be issued in a total amount of $456.15 and payment of invoices presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ayers, second by Ms. Kunkel, that the trust fund warrants be issued and the payment of invoices presented. Are there any questions? All in favor say aye. All opposed? All right, old business, return to learn. Mr. Struz.
So tonight is kind of, I'm gonna go through, Mike will put the presentation up on the screen for you to see as we go through this, but really tonight kind of want to update you on the status of where we are and what we've been learning here as of today. Originally, we would have had our board meeting on Monday night, the 25th, when the weather struck. This is the schedule we were going to follow tonight, the goals and the metric data that we've been looking at since the start of the school year. I'll give you an update on that. I'll show you the survey results that we have sent out to both the elementary, the junior high, and currently the high school data we're receiving is due tomorrow night at 4 o'clock, so I'll have that updated information for you tonight too. And then what we know as of today, and also any public comments that people would like to share, we'll go through that and let the board ask any questions. You know, I want to go back to our original goals and just learning our metrics of what we were looking at from the beginning. The 3 goals that we had, we want to provide a high quality learning experience for all students, no matter the learning model we were in at that time and still in currently. You're looking at making sure we're providing a safe environment for everybody, for our staff and our students at all times, and once we were in school, to remain in school. And it's nice to date, we have hit that and made that mark as we've gone through these. The metrics we looked at originally were our 14-day running positivity rate, our district positive rates, quarantine rates for staff and students, other data within our district, which would be like attendance data, school districts around us, what we were seeing there. And also, we started looking at our grade band data to see if there was a difference between the age of students and what we were seeing across those, if we were going to bring a certain school back or a level back versus everybody. So we'll look at those here tonight, and you can definitely ask any questions. This metric one, you've seen this before. What I did for the updated one today is to kind of show you a running mid-month total since August to where we are today. Again, you saw November 15th being our high date at 26.6. We've come down. Last Thursday, we were at 12%. Today, we're at 12.9. We were at 13 yesterday, down 12.9. So we're kind of fluctuating in that same band area. Pretty much the month of December, January, we've been coming down. This one here, when you look at the data on this one here, if you clicked on that link, it took you to kind of the positive cases that we were seeing across our time so far, every single week. Let me expand this out for you. Let's see this. What you would see here going through, if I scroll down again, you can see where the high month was, the high week of the 13th. Right now, this week, in students and staff together, we have had 13 positive cases of staff and students, and we've had 45 quarantine. That's roughly what we've been seeing since about mid-December going through those weeks. On the bottom, you can see kind of the totals of what we are looking at here for the months. So the first one, we had 12, 42, 118, 68, and 73 positive all those months that we've gone through. You can see the quarantines that we've had as well. Right now, what you're seeing, like I said, it was 13 this week, or last week, and 45 was our present ones. When you look at this side over here, the number of hybrid students we have, so with the number of kids who are currently in school at the 3 levels, elementary, junior high, high school, you can see the number of positive cases. Now, these are just student cases. I took these staff ones out at this point to give you a percentage of positivities of positive cases at each level. So you can see 4% elementary, basically 7 and 7 at the junior high and high school. The number of quarantine cases of the students present be, again, rough estimates, 25.14, 31, and 29, or 30%. A couple of things, we may have had some kids who, again, have been quarantined twice. So again, that's not a perfect estimate because I just took the number of quarantine cases by the number of kids. So you have that piece, and you've also had kids who come in and out throughout the time as well. But this would be a pretty accurate representation of what we're seeing after the levels going through.
So is there a date for, is this for the, what is, these numbers reflect what time? What time period?
These are all current as of today.
So right now, you're saying that 25% of the elementary students are in quarantine.
No. Since the first day of school.
Okay, that's
25% of our students have been quarantined since the first day of school. Yes. And then 30% at the other 2 levels.
So those are cumulative numbers.
Cumulative numbers, correct. Yes, correct. So if you wanted to go back and look at over here, the first column, then it's the staff and students, but you would see roughly how many we've had each week as a running total. Other data that we look at, so going through here, let's see that one there. Down here, now here's another look at metric 3, the impact of COVID on finding substitute teachers. So you look at this information, back in September, our daily teacher average per day for the month of September was 19 teachers per day. And you can see we are currently, this month, we're at 25.15. What I would say though is, remember, we currently have roughly 5 teachers who are either on long-term or maternity leaves right now. So that would be, they're in this number, is what you're seeing. When you look at our average fill day, so far for the month of January, we've had 1 time where we could not fill a position from a classroom standpoint, 3 in December. You can see what November looked like, what October looked like. So we've definitely come a long way. Couple things there. When you look at the number of teachers who've been absent, we picked up a number of student teachers who finished at the end of, in December. They've come on. We've also had a number of people who stepped up and said they wanted to be substitutes and taken the classes to do so. So we've enrolled a lot of new substitute teachers. So you can see our fill rates at which we are filling, which is very exciting. Average daily aid absence, this is probably an area where we get hit the most. And the biggest thing you would see there is we just don't have enough aides to fill. If anyone ever wants to be an aide, we are definitely looking for sub-aides at any time. But you can see we fill those between 44 and 60% of the time we are filling those. So you could say 50% of the time we may not have an aide available to us. Student daily attendance, we started really tracking this on this chart. I'll say the end of October, when we started seeing things spike and go up. The blue represents the number of students who are out due to other reasons besides COVID, so you can kind of track that. The red on top of it would be the COVID cases, quarantine or positive, and when you combine those two together, that's what's giving you the total high. So for example, take November 24th, you see the highest point there. It's at 12.5, so it's roughly probably 12.75 that day. That's combining the blue and red together. You can see after that point, we have really come down. You'd see the one spike here, you might say, what happened there? That was the 2 days before winter break. So that spike is not due to COVID issues, it's because people didn't come to school on those 2 days before winter break, as shown here by the high blue spike. Because the red's not very high there, it's the blue is high. Right now, I would say, and this was through last week, again, this week our student absentee rate combined was 4.57, 4.17, 3.48. That's what we're seeing for total absence. COVID-related 1.65, 2.2, and 1.3. So again, our COVID cases, again, remaining low compared to where we were. So metric-wise, those things are good. This one here goes back to our survey data. This right now, what you would see, I'm going to walk you through this. So if we were to come back 100% on-site or 100% online, that was our last survey data. At the elementary, we currently have 9 families who have not responded to the survey or responded to the phone call that all the secretaries and principals have made, so we're still working on that. You can see the number of students who would be online, the number of students who would be on-site, and the percentages. Basically 14% and 86% is what we're looking at there. So overall, it's very comparable to where we were when we were in hybrid and online, very comparable. Junior high, you can see they still are reaching out to 63 families that we're calling. Right now, you'd see the online would be at 11%, and the on-site would be at 81.5% right now. So worst case scenario at the junior high, if all 63 were to say we're going online, you would push that 10.99 basically to 18%. It would be worst case scenario. And I would anticipate that would not be the case. That's not what has been happening when we call families. The next one I'll show you, again, this is just, high school surveys aren't due until 4 o'clock tomorrow, but since that time, we've had roughly, if you add that together, around 1,500, the 82 and the 830, that's the number of responses we've had, so just over 900 responses. And we have 635 that we're still waiting for, but right now it's trending at 9% of the students would be online and 91 would be on site. That's what we're seeing right now until closing tomorrow. Then on Monday and Tuesday, Mr. Erickson and his staff would start calling whoever has not completed the survey at that time.
And you tell like 40% out.
Correct, yes. High 40s, yes. So that brings us to where we are today. I don't know if you were a chance to see it, but right now, as of this afternoon, the Senate has passed the bill to have all students K-12 respond or return back 100% with that option. That is passed at the Senate level. It's currently on the House floor this afternoon, and unsure if the House will vote yet tonight, how long they stay in session, but anticipate something coming tomorrow if it passes tonight, or maybe Monday being debated again and then taken to the governor at that time. Last word I had is about 1 o'clock this afternoon. If it passes today or in the near future, our return date has to be by the law, would be 2 Mondays following the governor's signature. So right now we'd be looking at February 15th, which we don't have school because it's President's Day. We'd be targeting February 16th as our return back. Good things with that, number one, if you recall back in November, February 16th was the date we were looking at elementary because that's the new day of their term, so it's a perfect break for them. Junior high and high school, Mr. Pekin has been working with his staff in terms of schedules and what that would look like for students coming back, so they have to work through that piece. And the high school, as of a couple of days ago, has started looking at if we have to come back February 16th, what does that look like for hand scheduling the kids who would be coming back into classes? Remember, in that situation, at the high school level, back in December, our plan was to collapse teachers to keep them in hybrid for the rest of the year. And so we have taken some teachers where they are now teaching a period online to their students. Well, with this new legislation, if it passes, that's not the option anymore. So we will have those teachers go back to the classroom, and that's where our communications has been. Junior high and high school, if we come back 100%, teachers will start live streaming their classes, and students who are at home online will log in every single period as if they were in school at that time. So at the junior high, if class starts at 7:30 to 8:15, a student would log in for first period during that time, exit out, log into their 3 minutes later, log into their second period class. Now, will kids be on the entire time? That's up to the discretion, the art and the science of teaching that teachers have. That's up to them. For example, they may start a class period, take attendance, do a 5 to 10 minute presentation or whatever that might be for the new learning, and they may say, okay, kids, break up in a group session. The students at home could then be connected with the kids in the classroom, or the kids at home could be on a group session together and working that way. Or the teacher may say, watch this video, come back in 20 minutes. I mean, those are the type of things that teachers have discretion on how it's best to teach their class. We won't get into the weeds on that side of it. But, like I said, right now, every indication is that is what will transpire February 16th.
So when the students are in the classroom, when they do go back, are they all going to have a laptop with them as well so they can interact with the kids that are online as well then? So they'll be having their laptop open in the classroom?
Yes, because remember, we went 1-to-1, 7 through 12. So every student has a Chromebook or a device that they would have, whether they're in school or at home. Yes. So that's the most recent information that we have that we are planning for. From a safety mitigation measure, then remember, a couple of things that we look at. Number one, we started the year in hybrid, we were maintaining 6-foot distancing for the most part. I mean, there were times when people are both masked and kids might be working together, but throughout the day, it's pretty much 6 foot. Now, at max, in most places, we will probably be 3 foot social distancing, and at times less than 3 foot social distance. But again, the key is our kids have done a phenomenal job wearing their masks and helping on that way. Teachers are still having kids wash their hands. There's still hand sanitizer when they come in the classroom. All those things remain critical for us to do. You know, research would say, studies would say out there right now, and there's a lot of studies, you know, but if you go 3 foot and everyone's masked, you're okay. I mean, the chance of transmitting in schools from the research they've done the last few months is very low, and especially low if your community positivity rate or the hospital beds is low, which right now we are seeing in our community. The emergency room beds are pretty low in terms of COVID. So we have not seen the spread in schools, which we would hope would continue. So we will make sure that all of our mitigations are still in place. One example, the largest place you can congregate kids is the cafeterias. What does that look like? As of this week, we just purchased a number of dividers for cafeteria tables. Each, you know, our tables are 12 foot in length, 6 foot sections. So we will have 2 dividers on each table, 6 foot in length. And basically what it would be, if Debbie and I were sitting here, there is a divider between us and between Dr. Wagley and myself. They are at an angle so kids can still turn, talk to people next to them, see their eyes, that type of thing. I mean, is it 100%? I mean, free? No. It's kind of like what we have at lunch right now. If we have to quarantine someone because they're unmasked, we know exactly who's sitting by who's having a conversation because it's assigned seating, and they may have to be quarantined at that point. That has happened all year. Again, not a huge extent, but it does happen. All of it, we'll have 8 kids to a table. Elementary principals have gone through and looked at what does that look like so we can maintain that. Junior high they'll have the dividers as well. That plan's been put in place. The high school are still working through because right now the last thought was to use the theater. So they're working through that. That's the place where we have kids social distance. That may change between now and February 16th because we're still thinking what's the best way to do it. But we will make sure that it's a safe environment for kids. You know, classrooms, we talk to teachers and teachers are working through how do I create the greatest distance in my room with what I can do. So we'll be watching that. Elementary, give you an update there. We will right now anticipating, we had 3 online teachers for every grade. Coming back with these numbers, we will decrease that down to 2 online teachers per grade. The reason being, in some of our buildings, we needed the teacher to come back. Let's say you have 90 kids who are now in 4 classrooms. You can't do that with 3 teachers. That'd be 30 per teacher. So bringing the 4th teacher back in cuts that number down to what is just a better situation. It does look like we'll hire 2 long-term subs for Hopewell Elementary for 2 grades where the number of the kids coming back is too high, but we still need a teacher to teach the online for the other elementary schools. So we'll hire 2 long-terms there to do the online piece. Mike and Cindy, am I missing anything else that we've talked about at this time?
Going through my checklist in my mind, I think we hit it all.
Yeah. I mean, it is not, this is something we have not taken lightly, knowing that this was coming here the last couple of weeks and not potentially having the option. So we had to figure out what does this look like. There is no doubt high school has some scheduling that they will have to do. Junior high will as well. And elementary, what we will see, just like we saw between first and second term, we will have to adjust some students potentially back to a different teacher. The goal would be not to have a student go to a 3rd teacher. So for example, they started the year with 1 teacher, went to a different teacher. If they had to change, can they come back to the original teacher that they had in the building? So we'll try to minimize that movement too. The plan would be that this stays in place until June 3rd, last day of school at this point. And again, we're hoping that everything we put in place, we do not have to go to either hybrid or go back to 100% online at any point.
I think that you said go back to hybrid, that's not really an option anymore, right?
No, what I'm saying there is if our numbers got to a point where the governor would say you have the option to pull back, That's the reason, yes, yes. But once you go 100%, we will take hybrid off the table.
And it's just to clarify, it's not that the law is requiring us to do that, it's just pragmatically you can't.
Correct.
It's not practical to have.
Yes. You know, the law at the state level is designed to allow kids to have the same learning opportunity. That's why they want them to come back 100% because of inequity across the state. And I told the governor's office when I talked to her liaison, I said, you know, if you offer hybrid and 100% back, those kids are not getting the same opportunity. I mean, a kindergartner who's in the classroom every single day versus a kindergartner there one day and not the next, it's different. And they agreed with that, and they said, yes, that's true. So we have to offer the 100% back.
Well, offering the online, there's concern, obviously, with the hybrid, then they have the online.
Yes, yes. And at the elementary, so the online teacher designated, junior high, high school goes to live streaming. So in the classroom, to let you know what that looks like, the teachers will have the Jabra, which is that device right there that you see. They'll have that so the kids can talk back and forth. Teachers have been set up with 2 monitors, again, 2 screens going at one time. And then the kids on their Chromebooks will be able to communicate with the kids at home, or the kids at home can communicate with each other, however you set that classroom up to look like. Like land school. Land school, why don't you, I mean, I'm not totally versed in that, so why don't you go with that one? From an assessment standpoint.
There's 3 what I would call foundational pieces for the live learning piece, and that is I see you, you see me. That's the 2 monitors. I hear you, you hear me. That's the job. And the other one is, from the teacher standpoint, I know what you're doing on your computer, whether you're at home or in the building, that you're not playing games, you're not off doing something you're not supposed to be doing. So we have purchased a site license for land school, which allows the teacher to control exactly what the students are seeing at all times on a district device. So they can, whether you're at home, they can look to see, no, you're not going on there, and they can control that screen and off you go. So those 3 are pretty important, because that was a complaint from teachers saying, hey, they're just logging on, they're turning their camera off, they're turning their mic off, they're just off, I don't even know what they're doing. They're playing what happens. So it was working very hard to try to address those barriers and concerns, rightly so.
Will that just be for junior high and high school teachers, or will you give that to the elementary online teachers as well?
We have it for the district, I believe.
Yeah, we'll ask Kevin on that one, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm assuming if we have junior high, high school, it's probably a district license, but I have to check on that to see. Good question.
Would it, if I was listening to you correctly, in elementary school, wouldn't necessarily help because they aren't assigned a device, and so it's not a.
For their online teachers, so we got 2.
Right, but the online kids at home, they're using their own personal computer and.
Correct, it
Yes.
was not just a district device.
There's probably a mix of those. We do have some families that have checked out a district device, but it would be a mix of home computers, home devices, and school devices. We can check that out.
I will do that, right?
We'll take a look.
What other questions we have from the board?
I think as fast as all of this has moved in the last couple weeks, I anticipate that this will probably pass tomorrow. I don't think they'll wait until Monday. I could be wrong, but so let's say it passes and we're looking at 2 weeks out of doing this. Are there any challenges that you see in terms of safety that is going to be hard for us to implement? Or are we in pretty good shape in that respect?
You know, it takes me back to August. It really does. And I think why it takes me back to August is it's the uneasiness of what's going to transpire. You just don't know. But what we've seen by students and teachers wearing masks, it really has been a positive thing that we were fearful of. Again, our positive cases, our quarantine cases, tend to be from outside of school, not in school. And we still have parents testing positive, kids testing positive. But if we're wearing masks, we're not seeing that transmission amongst each other in school. The other positive thing I'll tell you is, as of today, tomorrow, we should have the registration link for all of our teachers to start signing up to get their vaccinations. The dates will be February 5th and 6th, and the 12th and 13th. So it's a Friday, Saturday. And they'll have the Moderna vaccination, so it's 28 days later, so it's the exact same days in March. So they end up having a Friday, Saturday again. We have approximately 88% of our staff who are going to be vaccinated, and that's everybody from bus drivers, food service, custodians, office staff, teachers, coaches. It's our student teachers coming in. It's our substitute teachers, sub-custodians, sub-bus drivers, everybody. We have close to 700 people who will be receiving the vaccination on those days. We were originally going to do a priority list, but the health department has guaranteed there's enough vaccinations for everybody, so they will just sign up whatever day works best for them, because it's within a week, so we're not going to worry about age and high risk just because it's within a week. So our teachers, North Scott, Bettendorf, and all the non-public schools will be going to the old Sears building in North Park Mall, and Davenport will be utilizing Genesis Health OC, is where they will be getting their vaccinations. So all teachers, everyone in the school system should be vaccinated by the first dose by February 12th or 13th, that Saturday. And then the following a month later, the other one. So again, a nice protective measure for our staff in that regards there. So we're excited that, again, we were saying at least give us the vaccinations come, but now at least we're getting close to being there.
Any questions from the board?
I just have one question. I don't know how relevant this is, but maybe it would make some parents feel at ease. Do you have any comparison between the absentee rate currently to what it was last year? And is there tending to be just about the same number of absences reported, or more or less, that might help parents kind of have perspective on, making a consideration between sending their child back?
Yes, a great question. On a typical year, our standard daily attendance rate for a year average is like 95.6 or 96.5. So basically, you'll get 5% of your students are gone on a daily average across of a year. Right now, like I said today, we were at 3.48% total absence. So that's pretty much what we've been running the whole month of January. So when you look at our absences, we're pretty much where we'd be on a normal time. Yep.
Last year about this time, we were hit by the flu in our buildings, and this year, not so much. There's some really positive things about, in addition to preventing COVID, it's keeping us from getting the flu and passing colds, so.
The flu numbers are just really common this year. It's because of this.
Yeah.
The pediatricians who normally have a flu clinic told me that it's very, not well frequented right now, which is good news, so there are benefits definitely. And you're right, nurses have seen that as well.
And washing hands and hand sanitizing, all those measures, and they were cleaning everything all the time. Cafeteria tables, the high touch areas, the desks. Our teachers are doing a phenomenal job. Custodians are doing a great job. It's just keeping things clean more than you probably would do in a normal day, normal year.
Other questions? I have a few. Okay, first of all, were you able to see any of the details of the bill so far?
Not really.
In regards to, I know that initially there may be some talk that maybe there'd be a staggered start for schools, or you think that the start's not going to be staggered?
It will not be staggered. Every indication that we've had in talking to legislators.
Okay. Will there be a trigger where if the numbers rise, but you can still apply for a waiver? Will that still be an option?
There has been no talk or no mention of them taking that waiver away. I think what we started to see come December in January, when people were asking, I know of 2 districts that were denied in that first part of January. Their community rate was still at around 18% and they were denied. So I don't know what that'll look like moving forward if a district were to ask.
Okay. But there is a waiver option, at least that's not going to be. So the measures that were in place before, more than likely will be in place now with regards to that, but they're just adding the school choice test.
Correct.
And 100% on-site choice aspect. Okay. Then the next question is, and maybe this is for several of our audience members, is how do teachers feel? What I know this is being essentially mandated by the state on having students come back and having to allow them to come back every single day. What is the feeling of our teachers regarding this?
I can let them respond, but I think it's kind of back in August, there's uneasiness at points, but I will let them respond.
I think the general sense is we wish that we would have been able to, I mean, we all want to be back with our kids 100% obviously, but safely. And the wish is that we could have done it in coordination with getting our staff vaccinated, and there's disappointment across the board that we are not able to have the choice to align those two together. And I think there's some general, I mean, it's gonna change so much. We're worried about kids and all those transitions that they're facing, and
I would say the other thing too is just the distancing piece. I think that just working with teachers are still working through that of how to really truly stand by the 3 feet if possible. I know that's just been a concern that's been brought up of doing our best to make sure we can do that as much as possible throughout the day. The classrooms are only as big as they are, so, and you know, getting the desks to that point has taken some definite creativity. So that piece of just making sure that if we're saying 3 feet as much as possible, that we can stand behind that as teachers, because that falls back on us, I would say.
And some rooms are bigger than others too.
Yeah.
You know, we are fortunate we have fairly big rooms.
That's true, yeah.
Some of the Pleasant View rooms are tiny.
They're very small, right?
And so I don't know that we can guarantee that kids will be 3 feet apart for the majority of the day. I mean, we can set the desks as far as we can, but there's not a ton of space to get them really spread out. So I think bus too, it is going to be a difficult time when the bus driver really needs to be focused on driving, not on who has on the mask and who doesn't, and the buses are going to fill up a lot more than they have been. So I think teachers are, I think we would all like to get back to normal, but I just think there's so much to think through safety-wise for this that it's still, like, until we get going in it, I don't think everyone's going to feel great. I think people are relieved that we do now have a date for vaccines, and that's coming up quickly.
I would say too, just our the teachers that are having to do either both or are the virtual teachers, there's going to be a pretty large adjustment for them coming up in a couple weeks. So we're just trying to support them as much as possible and helping with that transition with just shuffling kids around, or I'm speaking at the elementary level specifically, of just knowing that my particular coworker has 9 kids that she hasn't had all year that will be now joining her. So there's just a large amount of work that goes into that piece too. So I would absolutely say what Brian said though. It's going back to August. I think once we get there, it'll be different, but it is just that anticipation and
I think our anxiety is a little bit lower in that respect, because one thing this has brought is like we've become really accustomed to being able to change within a moment's notice, and it's just one more change. And I think we've gotten to a point where, okay, one more thing we have to adapt to, and we have to figure out how to make that work for kids. And I think that's one thing that the teachers in all districts, especially ours, have done a really good job of just one more change, and we're gonna get through it. We're gonna figure it out. So,
As you know, as I said from the very beginning, your safety, the safety of all of our staff and administration, faculty, all the employees is of utmost importance to all of us. And sometimes we don't have any control of the government does. We have to follow the rules. Knowing that, is there anything in anticipation for maybe 80% of your kids coming back, maybe a little more than that, depending upon the school? Is there anything that you have seen that you haven't seen implemented that you would like to see implemented for the protection and safety of everybody? And I'm pretty comfortable with the plan when the kids do come back with being as safe as possible.
I'll just speak for me. I feel extremely safe. I mean, the room is as clean as it's ever been, or ever will be again, probably. But I mean, no, the measures we have in place is hand sanitizing and cleaning. For our building, I feel safe.
I think some teachers would like to have like disinfectant wipes. Right now we just have the bottles to spray.
And wipes would be kind of nice for like technology and things like that. I think our PTA had asked us like what things we need, and I think they might be trying to get us some cleaning supplies as well.
At the upper grade, we utilize our kids a lot, like wipe down your Chromebook, wipe down your desk. I mean, it just gives us more time to teach and less time to have to clean. And so, wipes help out a ton, because our kids can just go grab one and wipe their stuff off and be done. And I'm very thankful that we figured out a way to get our kids eating in our lunchrooms, because that was one worry of mine, like kids eating in classrooms. So I'm very thankful for that. So I feel safe.
One thing we've added that is new, in grades 6 through 12 for our band students. You know, our band students all had the instrument masks on their instruments. Last week we actually purchased special masks for kids to wear during band. So it's when they wear this mask, it actually has a flap over it as well. So when they're playing their instrument now, they will have a mask on too, where they did not have that on before when we were 6 foot. So another layer of protection for band. So,
So in the building, from what you have no talk of, we want this to be implemented, but we want faculty and staff to be vaccinated first, and then we can, like, there's no like criteria, and it's just, by this day, you have to go back regardless of if the staff is vaccinated or not.
yes,
correct?
yes, correct.
There's no time.
No, and that is a question we've asked. We asked for 3 weeks as legislators.
Can you wait until?
Yes. Can you wait? If you're making us come back, can you give us like a transition period where we'd say, okay, K6 comes back February 16th. Can you give us the high school until March 22nd? None of that was allowed.
Okay. And then I guess the only other thing is, I don't think we need to be spreading any more uneasiness.
Yeah.
But as you know, what's happening now in the States, and we're all feeling really good about this, and now we have some new strains that are found to be a lot more infectious. It has entered the United States already. It's not, I haven't heard any in Iowa, but as you know, things can spread pretty quickly, especially with these strains. Is there any talk, legislative level, about what happens if that penetrates into our area and we start having a higher amount of cases?
You know, first of all, I'd say 2 things. That mean watching data. I mean, you just watch the news all the time. You listen to the news, you're watching, you're reading as much as you can. You know, fearful things that I have, one is what you said, the new strain coming in, or what you see happening in California, how high their numbers were. You know, are those things going to move to the Midwest? Boy, I hope they don't, and you hope that everything we're doing, and hoping that the vaccinations in the next month, hopefully all that takes care of that. To answer your question more directly, I would say that's why I have not seen any legislation right now saying they would take away if you applied for the waiver to go back. I have not seen that disappearing anywhere. Maybe that's because if something were to happen come March or April, that is still an option. Boy, I hope that's not the case. But again, I've learned never to say never in these last 9 months.
Okay.
Brian, this is, oh, sorry. Do you anticipate, so if we go back 100% and we have, our cases start going up and whatever, do you think we could actually go back to hybrid, or we're just going back to online? I mean, we're either 100% back or 100% online, right? Hybrid is going to be gone for the rest of the year no matter what, because you can't, like high school, junior high, you can't switch back like that, right?
No, you'd have to, I mean, I think at the secondary level, you definitely say we're just going to go 100% online, and then you do the virtual learning online. You know, whether the teacher's probably in a classroom at school using a whiteboard, doing all those things while the kids are at home doing their learning, is what I would envision that looking like today.
My guess is that if we had to go and apply for the waiver and go, the numbers would have to be so high that we wouldn't even consider, even if we went hybrid, we'd be wanting to go online anyway. That's my guess. And so that's why hybrid probably wouldn't be an option. No. But, you know, who knows? Good question.
Yeah, and I think trending, what I would anticipate our quarantine numbers will go up. There'll be a spike in that because you're bringing everyone back. I think what we need to watch closely is what does your positive numbers do. Hopefully those stay where they are, but I could see a spike in potential because of lunchrooms, things like that, that you might see your quarantine numbers go up.
I know that, sorry. I didn't know you. I know that CDC has changed their rules on quarantining, and sometimes it's hard to keep up on all of that. So if we are at 3 feet distance, they are both masked, is that a close contact to quarantine, or does it kind of, is that okay?
So Dr. Wagley tested positive right now, okay? And we both have our masks on. I do not have to quarantine at that point. I need to quarantine if I start having symptoms. That's what CDC changed, maybe October, early November, that rule changed.
Okay.
Yep. And then right now, remember, the last change we had was the 7-day and 10-day quarantine guidelines. So if I'm quarantined for some reason, and I test on day 5, my day 5 test comes back negative, I can return on day 7. Okay? If I choose not to get tested and I have no symptoms for 10 days, I can return back to school. That's the new quarantine policies that we're following.
I'll be quiet now.
I was just gonna add that, back in August, I had that CDC list in a binder, and we're going through the checklist, especially with classrooms, and it was 6-foot spacing, all desks facing in the same direction. That it was spelled out pretty clearly what we needed to do. Well, with this, that portion of it is just all out the window. So then the question became, from a teacher standpoint, well, can I put my desk in pods of 4? Can I do triads? Can I do all the stuff that they do to make learning work? And the question was, at this point in time, yes, if you can do a pod and maybe you don't shove them all together tight, but maybe you put 3 inches or 6 inches is just enough to get that distance. Okay, that's great. So what is the absolute, we're gonna die on the hill for? One thing, everybody has to be masked. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. Without that, all of your questions about the quarantine, right out the window. You're gone. So I mean, that is enough. And then the hand sanitizing, keeping surfaces clean, the wipes, and everything you talk about. I mean, that's what our fallback position is to make this work. And so, we've had some questions come up about, kids or families or whatever wanting to find back the masking business. No. I mean, this is a health and safety issue.
Unless they have a medical waiver or religious exemption, yes. And we have some of that. But otherwise, everyone else is wearing masks.
The high school level, with more kids coming back in between classes, I mean, is somebody monitoring the congregating in the hallways, or is that going to be difficult? And then also, are we having the same rules when it comes to the locker situation? And right now they can bring a backpack, no locker.
I think Mr. P can remind me, we are back to, if kids want to use lockers, they can use lockers, correct?
They're school lockers, but not locker rooms.
Yes. So we'll continue that.
Okay. And what about the congregating?
That will be difficult to monitor. And just as everything, we'll do our best to monitor it. But the key thing is, as Mr. Zimmer said, students need to be masked 100% of the time. And then if they are congregating, they're congregating, but they're doing it safely. That's, at this point, the best that can be done and monitored within reason. I'm not as concerned about that from the duration of time. I'd be more concerned in the classrooms when there's 28 kids in the classroom in a relatively smaller class size. They're going to be around each other for a long period of time. That's where it's very critical that our students and our staff are adhering to that mask on 100% of the time.
You're exactly right. When you watch right now, kids at high school, they drive their cars, in other cars, including it's cold right now. A lot of kids are wearing their masks, walking from their car to the school because they're cold. It keeps them warm. But there's 3-4 kids walking together, but typically they're masked. So once they get in school, I tell you, if you just walk through the hallway, they're doing a good job wearing masks. And there's kids you have to remind them to pull them up, but you just go like this and they pull them up. They're not arguing or fighting that part of it.
Anything else on return to learn?
And
Oh,
I'm
yes,
not,
go right ahead.
well, that's okay, Dr. Roblin. I'm not here specifically for this reason, although I'm very glad that I'm here at all. But is there any, I'm just thinking of spring break. You know, like I know my daughter's college, you know, they've canceled spring break. Do we have any steps that we can take for like families who are flying that could like self-report and maybe stay home for like a week? I mean, I don't know, I don't know if we want to get into the complicated task of it depends on where they're going or how they're traveling, but it may just be, especially since we'll all be back 100% then. I don't know.
Yeah, great question. A couple things we've done already. We sent an email out to all of our staff members, reminding them that if they have spring break plans, they got to stop and think, because if you fly out of the country, 3 days before your flight leaves, you have to test in that country. So if you test positive, you're not coming back to the United States and you're stuck there. So that's number one reminder for all people. You know, number two, you asked a good question. You know, we had that same question back in August, on August 23rd. You know, should we tell families, hey, it's a week before school starting, 2 weeks before school, make sure you don't travel, or Christmas break or winter break and New Year's. The good thing is, even during those times, we didn't see a large spike. So I'm hoping people understand by traveling, they take a risk. And hopefully that people understand that they take the safety measures that we've asked. You know, we'll have staff that they have to go somewhere for a wedding or whatever it might be for a family gathering. It's like, okay, you're going, but remember, please be safe and take precautions. So they're hearing that from me as well, because I'm fearful of coming back, but we have not seen spikes at that point. So Jesse, good question.
Last week, there was an executive order that was signed by our new administration and our new president about this very question that you're asking. International traveling, there is a mandatory requirement for that 3-day check beforehand, and you have to show proof, and they're putting on the airlines now to not allow anybody aboard unless they're able to show a negative COVID test. Now the question, which is right now still up in the air, is in the executive order, it says to quarantine for 7 days after you return, even with a negative test, but then they have when feasible. And the question then now that they tossed to like the CDC and other health specialists is, are they going to make that mandatory? Now, if they do make it mandatory, how are they going to enforce it? There might be a penalty, there might not be, I'm not sure what it's about. So in this next week, they're in the process of coming up to fully solidify what those guidelines are. But this is mainly for international traveling, not for domestic traveling. But I'm sure that there will be another recommendation for what to do for domestic travel. So in the next week, we should know more. Anything else?
So I don't know if we really need a motion or not, but I guess, it really, the motion now would be, I guess, just we're coming back unless something changes at the governor's level where she doesn't sign it, but there's no anticipation. But right now, I'd say what we're looking at is K-6 coming back February 16th for sure. And then if they don't have to come back right away, the question would be junior high, high school. You know, do we wait till March 1st? Do you wait till spring or till fourth quarter? If we're seeing positive things there. So I mean, but again, I don't see this going any other direction right now. But getting younger kids back in school on a daily basis is a good thing for learning.
So, do you not want us to do the motion right now?
I mean, we can make a motion for formality purposes, but like I said, I believe unless things change, I don't see it. It's just kind of looking at K-6 coming back in 7/12 once we know the signature is there.
Didn't we already have a motion for K-6 coming back?
We never did because we were waiting until January.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I guess for formality reasons, I would say the motion.
I move the board approve the move to 100% online and 100% on-site learning model starting Tuesday, February 16th, do I want to say at elementary, at K through 6, junior high and high school dates will be determined based upon pending legislation.
Second.
Order was Hoskins, second by Mr. Ayers, that the board approve the move to 100% online and 100% on-site learning model starting Tuesday, February 16th, for kindergarten through 6th grade, and the junior high and high school dates will be determined based upon pending legislation. Roll call vote, please, Ms.
I guess I would make a friendly amendment that would take out the language on the junior high and high school dates be determined. It doesn't really say anything, so, I would just amend to take that out.
Okay. Everybody won't have.
Well, I'm not sure how Robert's rule, yeah, like, I guess it's
So, can I have a restated motion?
yeah.
Do you want to, let's restate it?
That's just my suggestion, but.
I move the board approve the move to 100% online and 100% on-site learning model starting Tuesday, February 16th for K through 6th grade.
Motion by Ms. Houston, second by Mr. Ayers, that the board approve the move to 100% online, 100% on-site learning models starting Tuesday, February 16th for our kindergarten through 6th grade. Roll call vote, please, Ms. Dana.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Ms. Brockman? Yes. Ms. Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Yes.
Mrs. Copeland?
Yes.
Dr. Wonders?
Yes. Okay, on the new business, we have chapter 103, board policy update. Mr. Struess?
So in your board packet, there's a number of new board policies and some revisions to board policies. A couple things that have driven this. Number one, the end of August, first part of September, we had our board policies reviewed by the IASB for the 5-year review. Debbie's madly working on trying to get those revisions taken care of with the information they send back to us. The second part of this change is Cindy, Mike, Rachel, Donald have been working with our special education because a new law came into effect on January 20th that has to do with seclusion and physical restraint. So because of those changes at the state level, IASB has given us recommendations for policies. So tonight, this is just a first reading. So typically what you would see, things in red are what is being recommended by IASB, and then what is black is our current board policies. So there's a lot of things here. What I'll do is kind of give you a quick scan through. I'll kind of talk about these. If you have questions, you can ask, but then the next board meeting we have, we then approve them at that time. The first one, student conduct. We've had this policy for years. What you will see in red is a couple changes. First of all, the biggest section has to do with student assault on an employee. What would transpire, what that would look like. In a nutshell, in summary, if you read that, if a student were to assault an employee, or the third bullet there with a firearm pointed at somebody, that basically would be a suspension, most likely leading towards an expulsion. So the principal would bring it to my table, my plate, and then I would bring it to you because we'd probably look at a potential expulsion. That's what that works through and talks about board policy, bringing it to the president of the board of the school board. At that point, if we're going down the path of expulsion, then that would jump in our board policy 502.3, which is expulsion. We just follow those guidelines. So that's a new piece there. The second one they put in there is just more definitions. You see the definition of detention, probation, suspension, and expulsion. We had separate policies on those in the past, which we're still keeping, but they recommend just putting a synopsis of what those definitions are in each of those situations. What you would see that we spelled out in suspension, just so you can see that, would be our rule is an in-school suspension would not be more than 3 days. They do not exceed 3 days. An out-of-school suspension does not typically expand beyond 5 days. And if it does go beyond 5 days, it's coming here to our table to have it, not to my plate, to say, hey, here's why this student is being suspended out of school for X amount of time. That's what that looks like. Expulsion, we have not had an expulsion for a long period of time that we can think of, but we do somewhat pre-expulsionary, where that's when they're suspended out of school for 5 days. They have to meet with me anyway. So I sit down with the family, the officer, counselors, the building principal, they have a conversation as what does it look like when they go back to school, then straighten things out. So that is really what that piece looks like.
Mr. Struess, you want to just take a moment so the board knows what that conversation is like? That
The pre-expulsion?
Yes.
Yeah. So pre-expulsionary, what transpires there is if they're going to suspend a student out of school for those 5 days, it just really comes down to, for example, it might be a student who has done something in school, that we just deem it could be an expulsionary situation. They come to me and I'll sit down and say, okay, are we changing the student's schedule? And what does that look like? What are our options? We just lay a lot of options out, and it basically comes down to the student saying, which option are you going to choose and how are you going to be successful in that? And if they're not successful in that, we can then bring them potentially back to an expulsionary hearing and say, listen, you didn't do what we asked of you, we can now expel you. But sometimes it might be a situation where the student's removed from the school. At the high school level, may take online courses for a semester, may take online courses for a quarter, whatever that might be. We have just options of what we do with that family and the student. But they understand that this is, if they don't do what we're asking, it comes before you as an expulsionary situation.
Even the language of Mr. Scrooge is, it'll be, not to be making a decision on your behalf, let's say, I know my board. If I'm gonna move forward with this, I'm pretty certain they're not gonna look favorably on that. And even if counsel is with the family sitting at the table, and they lay out, you want to go with our board? Because we're gonna end up at the same place. You're not gonna be back in our building, and we're still gonna be providing you educational services, whether it's to this, that, and the next thing. The result is usually is, we'll take this and that. Thank you.
Well, that's evident by the fact that, like, Dr. Wadley and I have been on the board since 2013, and we've never seen one of these. You've done such an effective job of triaging them.
Yeah, exactly. So you can read through that one there. The next one that you would see, go to the next page here, would actually be our current policy that we have in our board policy with no red marks, so you can see the difference between the two. The student suspension, you can see the policy that's behind it. It was in black. When you come forward, really what this becomes more administrative action. What happens in probation? What happens in school suspension? What happens in out-of-school suspension? The things I would mention there real quick, first of all, would be, we put language in here, because there's always it's unclear. Under in-school suspension, number 3, the student may participate in activity practices and may attend but will not be able to participate in co-curricular or extracurricular events or games. If a student is, let's say you're suspended for 3 days in school, it's a Monday through a Wednesday, and they have practice Monday night, they can go to practice because they're in school, but they cannot participate in the game or anything of that nature. So they're suspended from that piece too. Now they can sit on the bench, but they can't dress. And that's always been our kind of our policy. We just wanted to put it in there. If it's out of school suspension, that's a different story. If they're out of school, then they're not practicing, they're not attending any events, they're not attending any games, whether it's curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular. They're out at that point. But in school, we just wanted to put it in writing what that could look like. The other part I would draw your attention to is letter D. With special education, we're very careful on what that looks like too, because there's 2 things really leading into it. One, what is the reason for the behavior? And we have to ask ourselves, is it due to their disability or not due to the disability? And those are things we look at very closely. Again, we may suspend a special education student for a day because of behavior in a classroom, and they're in school, and we have our special ed teacher working with them, still meeting with them, and we're helping them out in that situation. But you also have to realize that at some point, if the behavior continues, let's say it happens a second time or a third time, then you have to start asking yourself, does it need to be a change in the IEP? Or is the IEP not being effective? And those are conversations the IEP team has, which is teachers, parents, administration, AEA staff, they would all be involved in that. Now, the other piece that's in there, number 2, if you ever get to the point where a special education student is going to be suspended, getting close to that 10 days, then you have to hold what's called a manifestation hearing, where you need to sit down and really look at for the whole IEP what's happening and is there going to be a change. We typically start to have that deeper conversation around 8, because we're not going to wait 10 to get to that point. But again, very seldom are we ever going to have a student suspended that many times to get to that point. Again, it's just doing what's best for kids and making sure you're looking at all things playing into it. You can see suspension, expulsion. The thing here, there's no red in this one, but this whole IASB policy that you see here in expulsion, that's new. We have not had that. It's not that, it's exactly what we do. It's just when you look at the next one, actually scroll 2 further, where the red and kind of crossed out, that was our old policy. The state recommended we make that a regulations page because it's such a, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. So that's just a simple change in that piece there. If you scroll to the end of that one, expulsion, you'll see we took out the red, which was the special ed paragraph, but we took that out because that was in the policy that's on the front page. So it is still there, we're not taking it away. It just did not belong in this one any longer. And then corporal punishment, we've always had a corporal punishment board policy, but they've added to it mechanical restraint and prone restraint. Again, you can read through those again. We just cannot use, besides corporal punishment, you do not want to use mechanical restraint or prone restraint either. Now, mechanical restraint can be used if it's a therapeutic reason for it. And that may be if it's an IEP for some reason. And that's kind of explained there. The other thing I would talk about here is it's very important that you understand when we're talk about reasonable force here, there are times where we have staff, aides, and teachers trained in CPI, which stands for, you guys remember? Crisis Prevention Intervention. Is that what it is, I think? Is what it stands for. Where we train special education teachers, aides, administrators every single year or every other year on how you restrain a child in a safe manner when needed to help them.
And Brian, they also focus on de-escalation strategies. So first, how do you prevent ever getting to the place where people are so upset that you have to, use physical restraint? So teachers are trained in that as well.
And currently, with the seclusion, which we're getting to, Mike or Cindy, you want to talk about the new trainings and videos that our staff are going through, or will be going through?
Well, right now, because the CPI training requires, that you oftentimes held in this room, or it requires that you demonstrate in practice that you know how to lean in if a kid's got your hair, to lean in and take that pressure off of it. Just those types of techniques. There's a 2-person hold to get a kid moved in a direction. Since that right now is not possible to do, that has been suspended, so to speak, that type of training. We're checking each month, but what they did come up with was a virtual 2-hour emphasis on the de-escalation strategies that you use before you ever have to get to the physical component. It's not the same, but it's the best that we have right now. And the AEA has been ramping up very quickly. There is a certification, I call it a Chapter 103 certification, that Dr. Lewis, myself, Mr. Pekin, has gone through, and it lays out exactly what you can and can't do regarding the whole physical restraint piece, the emphasis on the de-escalation, but basically it is a summarization of these policies. As a matter of fact, when we went through this, I had that certificate question open, and we were just going through and looking at the language exactly to make sure we had everything aligned properly. The only piece that's not on there, and I checked with ISAD about this, is there's a Senate File 2360 that deals with room clears. That is one that is not reflected in here, and I don't think it's going to end up in board policy, but it will be brought to your attention. We'll probably end up in a handbook or something like that, because it's more of a regulation and a protocol. So I just want to make sure that if you're reading in the paper or you're asked about it out in the public or something like that, you at least can address the 103, and the room clear piece is coming a little bit later.
Which leads us to physical restraint and seclusion of students, which would be board policy 502.5, and then a number of documents that follow after that. The key thing here is a couple things. As Mike was mentioning, physical restraint, and there's ways to do it appropriately. The seclusion of students, this is something that this is like a last resort for us if we're going to utilize this. As Cindy mentioned, very accurate, de-escalation is the key. At everything we do, how do you talk to someone when they're all excited, and how do you bring them down to calm themselves? That's our first goal. So if you've been following the last 2 years, this has been a very big topic at the state level as to what a seclusion room would look like. We currently have seclusion rooms at Hopewell, Bridgeview, and Forest Grove. Those would be our 3 places that we have. We used to have one at Riverdale Heights, but that would no longer be utilized because the programs are moving and shifting. But basically, typically, it might be in a case where a behavioral student program might be located. Again, not using them if we don't have to anyway. So that kind of walks you through here what that looks like and what is entailed there.
Can I have said, we might see it, necessary adjacent to one of our preschool special ed programs where very young children their emotional regulation is immature and they might be, get very angry or, and so it would be just a way of giving the child a space to cool down. And, but that would be one application there where we would have.
That's why I said Bridgeview, exactly. Then everything else after that, just really as you read through it, it just walks you through the documentation required, the phone calls that are required, the parent meetings that are required, and just again, they're great measures to have because it creates a plan to help the student be successful. That's why they're there. We've gone through this with all of our administrators so they are aware. They'll go through with their special education teachers so they are aware that we're following these. And these get mailed home or emailed to the parent would prefer once the plan is in place. So it just documents what we need to do in each of these procedures as you read through those.
I might add into this that Mr. Street has summarized all school employees that might be impacted or working with stuff. Our question then arose to where does that place our SROs?
School resource officers.
School resource officers. What should be their response, and how, as a school district, do we utilize that resource? Because they are not district employees. They are employees of the Scott County Sheriff's Department. We send a check that offset whatever percentage we've agreed on. So right now, Deputy Baldwin out of the junior high has taken the AA certification, so he's aware of what the 103 says, what the guardrails are for staff. Deputy Fa, I've been in contact with him, sent him, and he will be completing that here within the next 1 to 2 days, completing that also. Then I'm going to set up a meeting with his sergeant and the 2 SROs, and we're going to go over, okay, what did you learn out of that, what did we look at, so that we are all on the same page about what the district employees' guardrails are, where your guardrails are at, so that we don't end up with a situation, and I've been here long enough that I've seen enough, that we're putting you in a situation that is not going to be favorable by the media, by our community, by any other stretch of the imagination, but also trying to deal with a situation in which a student is, I don't know if this is a fair way to say it, but when you witness a student that ratchets up like that, it's almost similar to what happens if a student has a seizure. I mean, it's just out of control. And when they start to de-escalate and come down, they're just exhausted. I mean, it's just like, they just lay down and are almost gonna go to sleep. Because it is a traumatic incident for everybody involved, every single person. So it's been a good conversation. I applaud the state for addressing this, and it causes us to step back and look at it from all aspects. So I just thought I would address, at least make you aware that it's more than just our employees. We need to make sure that everybody knows what their role is.
I have a question along those same lines. Is it outlined as far as the protocol goes for the number of individuals that step in and when? So you mentioned the resource officer. The reason why I ask this is because if a child is that escalated that they're in crisis, the more people that are attempting to de-escalate the child actually can make the situation worse. And so, you are working with a child, is there protocols in place to say, yes, I need one more, or, you know, two's enough, or we need a third, so that we don't have too many people trying to remedy a situation that's actually then potentially making it worse.
Go ahead.
So you asked a really good question, and I think the number of people that need to intervene is dependent upon the age and the size of the student you're dealing with. So I know Mr. Pekin has been in a few situations in which we follow and track these students and how many people are involved at, say, third grade or fourth grade or fifth grade, and then by the time all of a sudden they're growing and maturing, and then all of a sudden it's like, this is a little bit more. So we've got some students that are pretty good size now, and it has been difficult. And here's where, when you have a student in that situation, the location of both the sensory room and the seclusion room is absolutely critical. So if you have the spaces and an incident occurs and you're way down on one side of the building and you're trying to corral and get the student down to that area that they know is their safe place, that's what we're talking about now. And that is, if a student is at that level and it's part of their IEP, that where their academic plan is being served and where these resources are at, they're as close together as possible. So then you're not having to have that episode visible by everybody in the building, you know, passing time, or oftentimes these occur at the worst time, you know, cafeteria or whatever. That's how to try to minimize that. And we're not there at some of our buildings, but that's what we're working on now.
And Mike, would you say typically 2 or 3 at the most for most situations?
Yes, and we always make sure when it gets to be that point, it's individuals that have gone through the CPI certification, so they know the proper holds and some of the pieces there. But yes, it's trained individuals that are almost considered a crisis team. So it's consistent, especially for students who may experience multiple episodes like this. It'll be consistent individuals that student is used to interacting with on a daily basis.
I could speak the same with elementary. That's how our whole quality is that it's a limited number of adults, and if it's a situation where one has been exhausted throughout, like they tap out, like they leave and someone else takes it, so it's not 7 people standing around, because you're exactly right. So
but
there are protocols in place.
It is important to have multiple people trained. Yes. Because there could be a time where maybe I'm not in the school, or Deputy Bodden is at one of the elementaries, or one of our deans is busy with another disciplinary matter. So there needs to be a team that has multiple individuals that are trained, that know the student and their needs, and are well versed in whatever plan fits their behavior plan.
And sometimes it's asking too, you know, at our school, a lot of times it's kids who have special needs and saying, do you need help? Do you need to get someone, you know, or just taking the other kids and clearing the hall or wherever it's happening, so that there is a little more of a private setting for that.
In your policy, with regards like the suspensions in school and out of school, it says not more than 3 or not more than 5. So is that, who determines how many days?
You know, it really comes down to the principals. They really have the reign of that piece, and a lot of times they'll pick up the phone and they call Mike, Cindy, or myself and say, hey, here's the situation. What do you think? What's appropriate? And sometimes it kind of gets to the point where there's certain behaviors you just say, yep, that's a 1 day or that's a 2 day, or it depends on the student and the number of times it's occurred. Those things all play into decision making. But as you'll see in board policy, it can't go past 10, but we set it at 3 and 5.
Okay.
Or they gotta be calling us to get.
I appreciate you asking that question, because on the policy, and I want to give kudos to Mr. Pekin and Mr. Erickson when they were assistant principals with the Alpha High School, really changed an attitude about, you know, if we send a kid out of school, we've basically abandoned what we can handle. We just turn them out in the community and say, there you go. Now, there are incidences which that is appropriate. I just cannot have you in the building if you're dealing drugs or, you know, that kind of business. But if it's something less than that, the ability to use probation, or being able to, and it's actually described, so I know Mr. Pekin, they would modify, say if it's a 3-day in school, it would be, okay, I'm gonna implement this, and it's something less than that, so I can keep you in the classroom. And if you follow these criteria, then we're just gonna leave it at that, because you met the criteria. But if you don't, I'm gonna come back to the table and we are gonna implement this. And that has caused, when you get the June report, you remember which will come up where you get the discipline report, and you should start to see these declines in out-of-school suspensions, and, you know, maybe all of a sudden you see less out, you see more in. And then all of a sudden you might see the in go down because they're modifying that for some other penalty that really has to give, like, well, I'm pulling your parking. I'm talking at the second, I'm pulling your parking pass, and you're not going to be able to do this privilege or something like that. Start pulling privileges versus some of those things like that. So I think the board policy now codifies some of those actions. But speaking, you have.
Explain well.
I think under student conduct, one of the last paragraphs we put in there in the black term, it's black writing, is what all employees of the district share the responsibility for seeing the behavior of students meets the standards of conduct conducive to student or learning situation. That's that ownership we all take in the kids in our classroom. What do we do from a classroom management standpoint, behavior standpoint? How do we help the child be successful? So when you go into those suspensions or those, that's a serious thing, and you're trying to teach the kids to think through the problem and to have them take their ownership as well. So it's a learning experience.
By sending a child home, you lose all your leverage for making an instructional moment, so kids are learning in those settings too.
Okay, anything else on that? If not, so we are gonna have another meeting on this at the next meeting, and then I think there's an error in the board packet where it says the February 25th meeting, but we don't have it on the it's in the February 22nd meeting because Len's will be approved. It's okay.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So no required motion on this meeting. Our next item of business is the high school swimming pool change orders. Mr. Plainsmith.
Yeah, we have 3 change orders to bring to you tonight on the high school swimming pool project. The first one is for Gas Concrete Construction Corporation. It's a deduct of $1,826.72. On this particular component of the project, there was a $5,000 allowance which was built into the original bid on that part of the project, and there was a purchase of a door. We installed what originally was a single door, and we turned it into a double door from the outside of the swimming pool area to the inside of the building where the swimming pool is. And so Gas Concrete Construction Corporation actually paid $3,173.28 to American Industrial Door Company for their portion of switching that from a single door to a double door. So that $3,173.28 came off as a $5,000 allowance that was built into their bid on the project, which left $1,826.72. Since the project is now completed, what this change order does is it reduces the cost that we would have had to get Concrete Construction Corporation by $1,826.72. Now, as a reminder, on this project, we used the construction manager method rather than the general contractor method. So each of these, we had separate contracts for the different components of the project. So Gas Concrete was the concrete portion of the project, and then Bush Construction was the general trades and some of the other portions of the project. So that's why we show these not the general contractor, but what did I just say?
General manager.
Yeah, construction manager for this project. So that's the first change order, is a deduct of $1,826.72 for gas concrete. Do you want me to go through the other two change orders and then let's just make all three motions at once?
Yes. Please.
All right. Then the next change order is for the general trades portion of the project, and Bush Construction Company Incorporated was the contractor there. What that was is we originally had an $8,000 allowance built into the bid for this portion of the project. And you see in the board newsletter, there were 4 different components that were subtracted out from that $8,000 allowance. The first one was we were charged $2,375 for electrical outlets that were added to the pool area. The second item, $1,830, was for miscellaneous paint touch-up in the pool area. The third item, $1,205, was for cutting that curb off the floor and cutting the opening for the expanded doorway where that double door that used to be a single door was put at. And then the fourth item was Bush Construction. Remember we talked previously about changing it from a single door to a double door? Well, Gas Concrete had paid $3,173.28 towards that double door, and then Bush Construction Company paid American Industrial Door Company $1,655.20 towards that double door. So we're talking about the same door, they just split the cost. Gas Concrete paid $3,173.28 of it, and then Bush Construction paid $1,655.20 towards it. So that was also subtracted off of the $8,000 general trade allowance. So that left a balance of that, from that original $8,000 allowance, that left a balance of $934.80. So again, since the project is now complete, we would see a deduct from what we originally were going to have to pay on the project of $934.80 for this change order. And the third and final change order on the project is also Bush Construction Company, and that is for their services as the construction manager on the project. And their services are based on a percentage of what all of the other contractors charged for the project. It's actually 6% of the percentage I believe that they get. So because of these other two change orders that we're looking at approving tonight, that reduced the Bush Construction Company construction manager fee by $165.35. So this would be a deduct, this change order would be a deduct of $165.35. Again, all three of these are deducts from what we originally were scheduled to pay, based on the original bids that they got from high school swimming pool project. So that is good that they are all deducts, because none of them are added to the project. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions, and like I say, we will just need a separate motion for the three different change orders.
Do we have any questions from the board? If not, I will take the first motion.
I move that the board approve change order number 1 for Getz Concrete Construction Corporation in the amount of a deduct of $1,826.72 on the high school swimming pool project.
Second.
Motion from Ms. Dixon, second by Mr. Ayers, that the board approve change order number 1 for Getz Concrete Construction Corporation in the amount of a deduct of $1,826.72 on the high school swimming pool project. Roll call vote, please, Ms. Dixon.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Berkman? Yes. Ms. Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Haskins?
Yes.
Mrs. Kunkel?
Yes.
Dr. Wardley?
Yes. I will take the motion for the next change order.
I I move the board approve the change order number 1 for Bush Construction Company, Inc., General Trades in the amount of a deduct of $934.80 on the high school swimming pool contract.
Motion by Mr. Ayers, second by Ms. Brockman, that the board approve change order number 1 for Bush Construction Company, Inc., General Trades in the amount of a deduct of $934.80 on the high school swimming pool project. Roll call vote, Mrs. Stewart.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Brockman? Yes. Mrs. Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Yes.
Mrs. Conkle?
Yes.
Dr. Wonderly?
Yes. Then I will take the final required motion for the construction manager fee deduct.
I move that the board approve change order number 1 for Bush Construction Company, Inc., construction manager fee in the amount of a deduct of $165.35 on the high school swimming pool project.
Second?
Motion by Ms. Conkle, second by Ms. Dixon, that the board approve change order number 1 for Bush Construction Company, Inc., construction manager fee in the amount of a deduct of $165.35 on the high school swimming pool project. Roll call vote, please, Ms. Taylor.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Brockman? Yes. Ms. Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Yes.
Mrs. Conkle?
Yes.
Dr. Wonderly?
Yes. As Mr. Pickens said, we always love the deducts, now we are not going to go over the deducts. We are going to talk about the junior high parking lot change order. Mr. Pickens?
Okay, on this project, we have 5 change orders that we're bringing to you tonight. And, unfortunately, these are all adds rather than deducts. Also on this project, this one was done using the general contractor method rather than the construction manager method. So all of these change orders are related to one vendor, the general contractor on the project, which was Tri-City Blacktop Incorporated. So we have change order number 9, an add of $9,221.85. This was for some patching and repairing of the north parking lot. So that would be on the side of the building back where the athletic field, like where the football field and stuff are. An add of $9,221.85. That was not built into the original bid on the project. Change order number 10 is an add of $1,500. This was to steel coat the driveway on the west side of the building. Again, was not included as part of the original bid on the project, but it made sense to do that. That's an add of $1,500. Change order number 11 is an add of $441. This was to delete the proposed west culvert and add a culvert on the east side of the building. So we got rid of the plans to add a culvert on the west side, but then we did add a culvert was needed on the east side of the building for an add of $441. Change order number 12, an add of $4,685.20. This was to add a 10-foot by 12-foot sitting area around the flagpole in the front of the building. My understanding is from talking to Leland on this is that we already had a sitting area there, that the concrete was in bad shape and needed to be replaced. So this was to put new concrete in and that 10-foot by 12-foot sitting area around the flagpole in the front of the building. And then change order number 13 was an add of $682.50. This was to add 17 arrows and 1 crosswalk for better traffic flow there at the junior high parking lot. So that was done again to help with traffic flow. Leland said that was a good thing to add to make things easier for traffic flowing out there. So the total sum of all these change orders, these 5 change orders, is an add of $16,530.55. So again, we can do all this in one motion tonight, since this is all with Tri-City Blacktop Incorporated. So take any questions if there's any questions, otherwise we will see the motion.
Where are we at on that project? And it's obviously almost done, but did we come out under budget, over budget?
I believe, right to where we are in this budget overall, does this put us over it because of the additions we did?
Yeah, it puts us over by about, little over $18,000. So basically, we would have been almost right on budget if it weren't for these change orders, but these change orders put us over by $18,309.17. Compared to what we had a 5-year capital projects plan that we would have approved back in January of 2020, what we had budgeted on that 5-year capital project.
And part of that would be the
I know we did do some shifting around of some items on the 5-year capital projects plan to help offset the overage here.
And part of it is it's self-imposed because we chose to, on that parking lot on the north side, because they were out there, like, let's just have them fix it, patch the holes, and the west side do those things. So those kind of all our own doing because we knew we were close on budget.
Yeah, well, not that I ever like to be over budget, but the improvements on that parking lot are just hands down so much better, so it's worth it.
The one thing I say, a long time coming, and it turned out very nice.
Yeah.
So.
Do we have any, communication from, I believe it's Leclerc about when they're gonna redo that area, where that comes over the bridge? We're talking about how we're doing this now, but then we're gonna have to make some changes when they ultimately come in and redo that area.
Yeah, the surveyors were out there last month again, and they're going through it. Architects are involved, engineers are involved. Right now, the belief would be they're looking at, do you do a roundabout there in front of the school, or do you do a controlled intersection? I would say right now they're leaning towards the roundabout in front of the school, which for the most part would be kind of it's kind of very similar to Middle Road, maybe just slightly larger than Middle Road, but very similar. Then Wisconsin Street will be taken care of all the way down to, I'd say for about 2 miles. You drive down the road and you can see where it's widened and narrows. So that'll be redone at the same time. And then they'll be coming over the bridge at some point, going all the way down to Valley Drive. That whole stretch will be redone as well. They'll be looking at the bridge here this summer, doing patchwork on the bridge. They'll also be putting in a walkway, a pedestrian walkway, all the way down to Leclerc, as well as to Pebble Creek Park, or the Pebble Creek Housing Addition. But we talked about holding on the Pebble Creek Addition until they make the bridge, put a new bridge in, because that's going to be coming at some point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then they would widen the bridge, because right now we would not want a student coming out of Pebble Creek having a sidewalk up to the bridge and having to cross that bridge. It's a pretty narrow bridge. And if you have buses going both ways, it's just not safe for a student. So they're going to hold off on that until the bridge gets redone. But that whole stretch of that road will be redone here in the near future. And they'll work with us in terms of what the transportation looks like from a busing standpoint and so forth.
Any other questions regarding the junior high parking lot change orders? Now I will take a motion.
I move that the board approve Tri-City Blacktop Inc. change orders number 9 through 13 in the amount of an add of $16,530.55 as presented for the junior high parking lot project.
Okay.
Motion by Ms. Austin, second by Mr. Ayers, that the board approve Tri-City Blacktop Inc. change orders number 9 through 13 in the amount of an add of $16,530.55 as presented for the junior high school parking lot project. Roll call vote, please, Ms. Stanley.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Mrs. Brockman? Ms. Dixon?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Yes.
Mrs. Kunkel?
Yes.
Dr. Levin?
Yes. And finally, tonight, the December monthly financial reports. Mr. Klingensmith?
Okay, yeah, we are halfway through another fiscal year here at December 31st, 2020. You have the monthly financials in your board packet. Again, not really too much unexpected as far as where the numbers sit here today. The only thing I was gonna point out again is like the nutrition fund, our food sales for revenue in the nutrition fund through the end of December are down 78.5% from where they were a year ago. But our federal reimbursement in the nutrition fund is up 88.7% from where it was a year ago. And again, of course, that is because you're not charging students for, lunch sales, unless they do Noah's Ark, for example, at the high school, and they have to pay for that. But for the basic meal, not charging students for that, and instead we're getting the reimbursement from the federal government to offset that. And I did check with Andrea, one of the board members last board meeting had asked how often we submit for reimbursement, for that federal reimbursement. And Andrea said that we do turn out a request for that monthly. So we are getting monthly reimbursements from the feds for that, to offset the money that we're not getting for food sales each month. That's how that is working. That's all I had on the monthly financial, but everything else is coming in pretty much where we would expect it to be this time of the year. Any questions, or otherwise just give a motion.
Any questions? Now I'll take a motion.
I move the board approve, or accept the monthly financial report for December as presented.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ayers, second by Ms. Bachman, that the board accept monthly financial reports for December as presented. Roll call vote, please, Ms. Damon.
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Ayers?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoskins?
Yes.
Mr. Kunkel?
Yes.
Dr. Wondrich?
Yes. Before we end, Mr. Schuster, Mr. Greensmith, can you give the board an update on the COVID relief money that was approved at the end of 2020 regarding public schools? And I know that we applied for it, we got money. Can you just let people know exactly what we got and the fact that it's all been spoken for?
Yes, and Mike, I can start. If you want to fill in and leave out, you're more than welcome to. The last money we received was ESSER funds. We received $380,000. $380,000 are given to us through our free, reduced, or socioeconomic status Title I numbers. So when you look at that, we were very pleased to get $380,000 until you start looking at what's distributed across the state, and that is a very low amount compared to what others are receiving. We have already submitted $360,000 of the $380,000. So again, it's just not really touching the expenses that we have, but we believe that additional money will be coming as well. And there's really two funds. There's the ESSER funds and the GIRF, and the GIRF is more for technology-related devices. So we believe another round of GIRF funds will be coming. And then President Biden has also talked about additional funds coming, so we'll wait and see. These are monies that we do not apply for. They're just given to us based upon those numbers. I've reached out to our legislators and shared with them my belief of the inequities that are distributed with these funds. For example, the GIRF funds, which are technology related, I think that's a very fair place to use Title I numbers, because typically for technology, socioeconomic status might be lower on that side. But when it comes to these ESSER funds, to me it does not make sense, because COVID is not discriminate when it comes to people and socioeconomic status. So I mean, we're buying just as much hand sanitizer as another school might be, or just as many, whatever it is, put it in that blank. And we got $380,000. Neighboring district got $1.6 million. Another one, he received $21 million. Des Moines received $42 million. And I think when it comes to that, I see that as an inequity across the state, so I shared that with them. Representative Moreland Munson, he's come here before. He actually is taking the same stance and brought it to the legislators. So we'll see if he has any impact on getting that changed for future funding. But again, thank you for what we're getting. It's definitely been helpful, but I think those funds could be distributed differently in the future.
it's really interesting that one of our neighboring districts is getting, $20 million, and that's the cost of our Forest Grove. Elementary school. And they're getting.
It's still $2 million.
Yeah, exactly. Plus an additional $2 million left to spend too. Well, we're getting 380. So initially, I was actually pleased when I heard about it, and then when I heard this, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Again, very pleased that we have what we have, but it's significantly different amongst even our Scott County schools. And so it would be nice. And so if you happen to see our legislators, you try and mention that as well. I think it would be very helpful as well, so they can kind of hear our comments as well.
But I would share, just some positive things. The money we received, all of our substitute teachers we had to hire from the first day of school through about mid-January were all covered through a grant through another company that was able to. So those are positive things that are happening, that we're getting refunded in different ways. Our movement to one-to-one technology, we use GERF funds for that. So we're very fortunate purchasing those jobbers for all the classrooms. So again, thankful for the money, just feel it can be distributed a little differently, in my opinion.
So our next meeting is Monday, February 8th. And then the next one after that is Monday, February 22nd. They're both at 6 p.m. We are going to be starting, I know, those informational meetings regarding the voting in March.
Yes.
And that, I think, is going to be coming up. Have you had any yet?
We have held 3 meetings so far, and next one's really kick off the first week of February. We'll be running those, all the PTA meetings, plus a high school forum, a junior high forum for both ends of the district. We'll have a forum here one afternoon at noon. If you want to jump on that one, they can. But yeah, those information's on our website, and I believe you put some Facebook posts out there, Beth, so we'll give them the information. There is a absentee ballot, just as you postmark to them by the 19th of February, so they get the absentee ballots back to you ahead of time to get back on March 2nd. So another option there.
We did meet yesterday virtually with the Club 89 editorial board also.
Oh, good.
All three is.
Ms. Taylor, the next board packet, can you just, on the future dates, can you please remember, can you remind all of us about the date of the election, just so we can keep it in the forefront of our mind? That would be wonderful. Yes.
Yes, I had just wanted to touch on one thing tonight, just so it's on the record, and ask for the board and administration's help in maybe rectifying something that unfortunately the weather disrupted on Tuesday. I have a son who's a junior at the high school, and so unfortunately the PSAT test was canceled that morning, and I just had wanted to say that from a large group of parents in the junior class, obviously we were disappointed that the kids didn't have an opportunity to take the test with a lot of other schools in the area in October when the test is normally administered. And I wish we'd gotten maybe some more communication back on that when that decision was made by the high school guidance office, because we just got a little 4 sentences in the e-news on September 25th just saying, we're not taking it in October, we've chosen a January date. Well, none of us knew that, the January date was actually the makeup date for the College Board for the SAT. So the school, and I don't know who was involved in the decision at all, but, we chose to set the SAT or the PSAT date for January 26th. And then of course, Iowa weather gave it to us. Now, it was my understanding that we could have actually started the test later in the day, but that was not something that was considered. And so then there was a lot of parents that were more upset, when all activities were canceled for the day, yet the basketball game went on that night. So there's just been some frustration. So I would love it if we can, even if PV could host an SAT here, because for the kids to be able to apply for national merit, I can't imagine we're gonna have a junior class where we're not gonna have any national merit scholar.
Is that going to be rescheduled for another day?
So what'll happen is, I can't speak to 100% clarity, but she's exactly correct. The students can now take the SAT, And that score would be utilized for the National Merit Scholarship versus the PSAT.
They're supposed to be giving us an option,
Yes.
but I will say, first of all, the closest one is Iowa City or Dubuque currently for testing for the SAT, and there aren't a lot of seats left before the deadline to apply for these as juniors. So there is an option for Pleasant Valley to host an SAT test, which I would love if we could get done for the juniors that were registered, or at least they'd have the option to take it, because right now there was like a handful of seats left at the Dubuque testing site, and I know unfortunately, just from having older children, that there will be some things that they're not eligible for scholarship-wise now, and that is really disappointing. And I have always loved our guidance counselor office at the high school before, and you know, from their recommendations with the no grades in the spring to other things, I feel like my student, and he would be here if he could be, he's at work to speak for himself, but you know, I feel like the things that he finds as a priority have kind of been slighted. And I know that that isn't necessarily reality. I know everyone here has the best of intentions. I think a lot of our staff and administration, but you know, this again was just another, really, we pushed the test off to the last possible eligible date. We chose a January date living in Iowa. So if we could try and give them at least an option, I know everyone would really appreciate it.
Mr. Zimmer and I will follow up with high school to see what our options are.
Awesome. Yeah, and I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Principal Erickson, so this is just, you know, me here thinking, okay, if there's any way that we can give them another option, that'd be great.
And if I could just state to that, I just received an email, communication from a parent right before the meeting too, and I've seen the social media. I saw a lot of discussion on social media too, and it is pretty alarming, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on social media. I just have had a couple friends, and my son was obviously my motivation for being here, so.
Right. Good. I appreciate you bringing that to the board, and Mr. Zimmer and Mr. Struble, obviously, and looking to see what our options are, but if we could try and deal with it the best we can regarding what happened.
Yeah, because there wasn't, at least the feedback from, and again, you know, communication is always helpful, because then you kind of can see what everyone's, you know, true intentions were, and there hasn't been, you know, any email to the parents or anything, and so that also, I think, makes it look like it's not a priority, and I know with our dedication to academics, that is not the case, so if we could try and get that rectified, that'd be great.
You bet, we will. Ma'am, what's your name and what's your son's name?
Kelly Williams.
Okay.
Jack Williams, he's a junior.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll follow. And Mr. Zimmerman is typing an email right now to high school, so we'll touch base tomorrow.
Wonderful. Anything else from the order? If not,
Okay, never mind.